Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fast Chat. I am Rochelle Butler, Energy Manager with the San Joaquin Valley Clean Energy Organization. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And as always, I'm super excited to be here with you this morning. This is like one of the highlights of my month. We are going to hop on momentarily, but first we're going to take care of our tiny little bit of housekeeping. Please make note that all of your microphones have been muted upon joining the call. This is simply to minimize background noise. If you have any questions at all, please go ahead and submit them using the chat box. You can do so at any point during the presentation. We will always save some time toward the end of the call to address all of your questions. Next, I would like to remind everyone to connect with us on any one of our many platforms. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Spotify, or you can just reach out the old-fashioned way via email or via telephone. Again, you can access any of our resources by going to our website at sjvcleanenergy.org. Again, that's sjvcleanenergy.org. And without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. This morning, I would like to talk about funding versus financing. With the Fast Chat, we have covered a fairly balanced amount of vehicles in each of those categories. However, we've always managed to use the terms funding and financing interchangeably. Today, I would like to take some time to kind of draw out the differences between the two. I'm going to highlight some expectations and examples for each, and I will wrap up with a brief highlight of some current opportunities that we haven't yet covered in the Fast Chat. So we'll go ahead and start with funding. Okay, so funding is what we would all prefer to use for our projects, right? This is kind of like the fairy tale of situations where we would get free money to pay for our energy project and not have to be on the hook to pay anything back. Funding comes in the form of grants and scholarships and utility incentives. But the reality of the situation is funding is very limited in supply. For example, I'm sure you have all noticed that utility incentives, that is the money that utilities pay to encourage their customers to install certain energy efficient technology. Those opportunities are getting smaller and smaller, and eventually, I have a feeling they'll be almost non-existent one day. To put things very plainly, no one is offering funding for things like chiller replacements or lighting. Here's some examples of funding that we have talked about most recently. During our last Fast Chat, we did, it was called A Tale of Two Grants, and we discussed two grant opportunities. One of them was the Environmental Justice Small Grants Program, and the other was the Renewable Energy Systems and Energy Efficiency Improvements Program, or REAL for short. One really quick side note on the Environmental Justice Small Grants Program. The deadline was actually extended from the original deadline of May 7th, 2021 to June 1st, 2021. And the funding cap has also been raised from $50,000 to $75,000. So if you're still interested, you do have additional time and a little bit of additional opportunity for that funding. Moving along, not so long ago, we did discuss the EPIC grant program. EPIC stands for the Electric Program Investment Charge, which is aimed at decarbonizing California's electricity sector. EPIC offers funding opportunities in different project categories periodically. Their most recent solicitation was for mobile renewable backup generation. The submission deadline has since passed. It was April 16th. However, the EPIC grants program is almost kind of like a revolving door type of program where they have new solicitations that come out throughout the year. So it's always a good idea to keep an eye out for those. If I see opportunities that I believe partners could potentially benefit from, I will most certainly host a fast chat on them. And I will also provide links to these fast chats in our follow-up email after the call if you'd like to take a closer look. Okay, so now that we've covered funding, we're going to move into financing. Financing is the reality for most of us for most projects if we don't have the outright capital to pay for them. So the idea is to find the type of financing that offers the most favorable terms and the best fit for the type of project we're seeking to execute. There are numerous types of financing out there. Some of the most common types are the financing that is attached to your utility bill or on-bill financing, revolving loan funds, whether they be in the form of internal or whether they be from an internal source or an external source that provides the money. Financing that is property assessed, which means you repay the loan when you pay your property taxes. And then finally, energy savings performance contracting, or ESPC. You may have also heard the term ESCO that's often associated with that. The ESCO is, it stands for Energy Services Contractor, which I'll get into a little bit more detail momentarily. So as I just mentioned, on-bill financing is a resource that we've covered a few times in the past. It offers 0% financing. It's relatively easy to access, especially via the utility programs. There aren't any like exorbitant fees to access the funding. So those are all really good points about on-bill financing. As I mentioned a second ago, we have covered it a couple of times in the past. It's not just because we love on-bill financing, we do, but we covered it from time to time because over the course of time, the program has changed and we want to make sure that we're capturing all of those changes. As for the current year in OBF, if you are a PG&E customer, your best chances of taking advantage of OBF is to go through one of the many third-party programs that PG&E offers for local governments, small businesses, and schools. So if you are considering OBF, please be sure that you're taking a holistic look at the facility in terms of energy efficiency instead of like one-off equipment upgrades. Every other financing vehicle besides OBF that we've covered for Fast Chat does carry interest and or fees. We have also talked about revolving loan funds because there are a number of resources that, that tap into this arena. For example, we do have partners that have successfully developed revolving loan funds internally to pay for their projects. In fact, we have one partner that their revolving loan fund has grown so much and so fast that she actually has to look for projects to spend the money in order to prevent losing her funding to other departments within her organization. So that's kind of one example of an extreme success case. Another example of a revolving loan fund is where the revolving loan fund is actually administered by another agency, and that's the external revolving loan fund model. And an example of that is our partners, the SoCal REN. They have a revolving loan fund program that is used as an interest-free way to bridge the funding gap between, bridge the funding gap that may be created by certain grant and loan programs. So those are all really good opportunities, and I'll also provide links to those in our follow-up email. Now on to some other opportunities. So there are two categories of financing that I would like to highlight. and those are the PACE program, or the Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing program, and the ESPC, or the Energy Services Performance Contracting model. Now, we haven't touched on these specifically in the past, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE program, is a really great resource, and it may be a good fit for some of our partners in specific situations. However, in the past, I haven't really felt like there was enough opportunity there to do an entire fast chat on it. So that's why I'm kind of mentioning PACE as a subset of this fast chat. And then also, as for energy services performance contracting, we've actually talked about or featured programs that fit this model, but we haven't talked about the model specifically. So I'll give you a couple more kind of in-depth points about both of those in just a moment. So we'll start with PACE. Now, PACE offers financing for residential, affordable multifamily, as well as small business projects. Now, the PACE program provides financing for both short-term and long-term projects. There are no out-of-pocket costs, and they offer terms of up to 20 years. Once the project is funded, the loan is then added to the property tax, and it's repaid semi-annually when property taxes are paid. Now, I've kept a very close eye on their big program rollout, which was about 2 years ago. There was supposed to be a fourth sector. That's why I kind of have it at the bottom grayed out. There was supposed to be a fourth sector that addresses the financing needs of non-residential customers, which would have covered all of our local government partners. However, that rollout didn't ever quite come to fruition. So the caveat for participating in PACE, if you are a local government, is that if you do have properties, or facilities rather, that are privately owned that maybe you lease, and I do know off the top of my head there's a handful of y'all out there that have those, then you would be able to qualify to participate in PACE, because the qualification would be determined by the ownership of the facility. So if the ownership of the facility is by a private institution and not by the public institution, then you would be able to participate. So I know that's a huge caveat, but there might be opportunities out there where that might fit. Okay, so moving along, the Energy Services Performance Contracting. You may have also heard the term, as I mentioned earlier, ESCO. That seems to be the term that gets thrown around a lot. ESCO actually stands for Energy Services Contractor. Now, in the Funded Fast Chat, we've talked about programs that fit within this format. For example, we talked about the JewelSmart Managed Energy Program in Fast Chat number 5. And we also talked about the Public Sector Performance-Based Retrofit Program in Fast Chat number 13. However, we haven't talked about Energy Services Performance Contracting as just the concept that it is. And it actually can exist outside of the programs that I just mentioned. What it is, in essence, is a turnkey program in which you partner with an ESCO, and from there, the energy auditing and assessment, the financing and implementation required to complete the project are all wrapped up in one kind of convenient package. So now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the many advantages of the Energy Services Performance Contract structure, because there are some very important ones. So the first one I'd like to point out is that, and it's probably the most important one, is that in this model, the energy savings is guaranteed. Now, you might be asking, how exactly does that work? Well, the Energy Services Contractor takes on the risk because most often that's how they get paid from the savings. So this is what the performance part in the title is referring to. Therefore, if they are unable to deliver the savings that are promised, then that cuts into their payment for the services. What this little feature does is it creates an incentive, number one, for contractors not to overpromise on savings, but it also provides for support after the project is implemented, because that contractor would then want to make sure that the intended outcome for the project is actually achieved. Which brings me to my next advantage, which is measurement and verification. How would we know if the savings goals are met if measurement and verification are not in place? So many of these contractors have very comprehensive methods that they use to measure energy usage before and after the project, which takes the pressure off of the customer to do so. And that leads me into my third point, which is project management. The project management is outsourced. We do have a lot of local government partners out there that do not have the dedicated staffing resources to carry out the project management. And so, especially for these guys, that model works out very well. The next advantage that I'd like to highlight is, and I mentioned it just a second ago, is that it is a turnkey process, which makes everything much easier for everyone. I like to think of this as more of a total package as opposed to being a la carte, if you will. And then finally, because of the turnkey nature of this structure, it does lend itself very easily. It lends itself very easily to being scaled up or scaled down. So there really isn't a considerable amount of additional work to implement a project this way on one facility versus 10 facilities. So those are your advantages for the energy services performance contract. And that actually wraps up the information that I have for you this morning. I did see a question pop up in the chat box. I want to give folks an opportunity to continue to submit their questions if they do have any about the content that I provided for you this morning. I'm going to go ahead and pop in here and read this question. This is from Ann Clues. Her question is, do you know if the EPIC grants are still aimed at Tier 2 and Tier 3 fire threat areas? That's a very specific question, Ann. And I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I have a very strong feeling that it's going to be dependent upon which specific grant opportunity is, but what I will do is do a little bit of research and I'll get back to you on that question. Okay. Okay, and while you're working on hopefully submitting some additional questions, I just want to go through a couple additional points here. I would like to remind everyone again, please look out for our follow-up email later on today. That email will include a link to the recording of this presentation, as well as links to any other related fast chats I may have mentioned along the way. I will also include links to all of the resources that I talked about during the presentation this morning. Take a really quick second and add us to your email contacts list. We want to be sure that you're receiving our communications so you can stay up to date on what's going on around the partnership. That email is info@sjvcleanenergy.org. Once again, that's info@sjvcleanenergy.org. And I'll take one last quick peek at the chat box. I don't see any additional questions, so I'll go ahead and wrap us up. I encourage everyone listening, please share the fast chat with your friends and colleagues. You never know how this information might be of assistance to them or how it might inspire ideas for new projects. What's next? Our next fast chat is already on the calendar for June 8th, 2021. We will be discussing the SoCalRen multifamily residential program. I know we have partners out there that own housing that would fit within these parameters, so please share this information wherever you see fit. And finally, I just want to remind everyone, or let you know, I don't know if you've been seeing our emails, join us for our June 2nd SJV CEO All Partners meeting. Network with your peers, learn about new utility programs to help you save energy and money at your facilities, better understand how to take advantage of resources and funding to better serve your community. This meeting is available and open to all public agencies throughout Kern, Tulare, Kings, Fresno, Madera, Merced, Monterey, San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and the Eastern San Bernardino counties. So we hope to see you on June 2nd as well as on June 8th. As always, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you again for joining us, and stay safe and stay healthy.